the winter of 1823, a fierce snowstorm trapped Maggie Greenale and her family's isolated homestead deep within the Appalachian Mountains. With nothing but a small fire to stave off the bitter cold, she found herself on the brink of death. It was then that a pack of wild dogs, driven by hunger and the harsh winds, sought refuge at her doorstep. Maggie, desperate to survive, invited them in. They huddled by her side that night, their bodies offering warmth like nothing she had ever known. Little did she know, this was the moment that would mark the beginning of an unthinkable transformation, a bloodline destined to become something more than human, forever entwined with the wild. What started as a desperate act of survival became a chilling legacy that would haunt generations to come. Before we dive into the story, I want to remind you to click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future episodes. This story is packed with mystery, transformation, and a deep family secret that will leave you on the edge of your seat. Now, let's continue with the story. The Greenale family had always been an enigma in the small, remote Appalachian town. Their homestead stood like a forgotten relic, hidden deep within a valley where the sun seldom reached the ground. It was said that the Greenales were different, marked by an odd connection to the wild dogs that roamed the hills around them. For 8 generations, the sisters of the Greenale family had carried on a strange tradition, one that involved sleeping in the same bed with the wild dogs. The townsfolk, who dared not venture too close, had always whispered of the Greenales' peculiar ways. Over time, the town's stories morphed into something darker, more unsettling. There were those who swore the sisters looked like something else, like creatures who belonged to the wilderness rather than the world of men. The first of the Greenale sisters, Maggie, had started it all. That long, bitter winter in 1823 was the start of something terrible. The snowstorm that buried her home also brought the wild dogs to her doorstep, seeking warmth and shelter from the storm. Maggie, a young woman at the time, was desperate for survival, and so she took in the animals, allowing them to share her bed, to sleep beside her as the storm raged outside. She had no idea that this act of kindness, born out of necessity, would set in motion a horrifying family legacy. When the storm subsided and Maggie emerged from her cabin, the dogs did not leave. They stayed by her side, and over time, something changed, not just in the dogs, but in Maggie herself. Her senses became sharper. She moved differently, more fluidly. The town began to notice, but Maggie never spoke of what had happened. Instead, she simply smiled, her lips curling in a way that seemed almost too animalistic. Her eyes, now more amber than brown, glinted in the moonlight. From then on, the Greenale sisters, one by one, followed the same path. The bond with the dogs became a family tradition, passed down like a dark inheritance, and with each generation, the change grew more pronounced. It was no longer just the dogs that slept beside the sisters. It was a way of life, a strange connection that grew deeper with each passing year. Now, in the year 1892, Sarah and Hannah Greenale, the 8th generation of sisters, were living the same life. They shared their bed with the dogs, just as Maggie had done before them, but something had shifted. The transformation that had once been subtle now felt imminent. Sarah, who had always felt the pull of the wild inside her, began to question everything. She could feel the change creeping under her skin, an urge to run with the dogs, to leave the human world behind. But Hannah, her twin sister, didn't question it. She embraced it. The connection to the dogs was more than a tradition, it was in their blood now. The sisters' bond with the wild was deeper than anything they could explain, something primal that ran through their veins like a current. As the years had passed, the line between human and animal had blurred, but now it seemed inevitable that something darker would take hold. And so, the two sisters continued to live in the shadow of their bloodline's curse, unsure of what the future would hold, but knowing that the change was coming. For Sarah, it was a call to adventure, a desire to uncover the truth about the Greenale legacy. about what they had become. For Hannah, it was something more dangerous, a deepening of the transformation that had already begun. As winter fell upon the land once again, the time had come for the sisters to decide. Would they continue the tradition, or would they seek out the truth behind the legacy of the Greenales? The valley was quiet, save for the distant howling of the wind through the trees, the kind of wind that whispered through the pines as if they were speaking in a language lost to time. Nestled deep in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, the Greenale homestead had remained untouched for generations. It was a place forgotten by the world, its boundaries kept by an invisible force, the pull of the land, of family tradition, of something darker than simple isolation. Sarah and Hannah Greenale, twins in their early 20s, had lived their entire lives within the shadows of this valley. They were born here, raised by the land and its stories, surrounded by the ancient wild creatures that roamed the forests. Their bond with the dogs was more than familial. It was something primal, a connection passed down for 8 generations. The dogs, larger than any animals the locals had ever seen, had always been a part of their lives, sharing their beds, their homes, and their secrets. But something was changing. The sisters had never left the valley. They had no need to. The outside world was distant, like a forgotten dream, unreachable and unnecessary. The village nearby whispered of the Greenale sisters' strange ways, of how the dogs seemed to follow them, their eyes gleaming with a hunger that mirrored the twins' own. And when the full moon rose high above the peaks of the mountains, the townsfolk swore that the sisters' movements changed. Their limbs became more fluid, their steps more measured, like animals on the prowl. But it was their eyes, amber and glowing with an otherworldly light, that truly unsettled the villagers. The sisters did not speak of it, not openly anyway. They had always known that they were different, that something within them had been passed down, something that grew stronger with each generation, something that called them to the wild. But they had never discussed the pull they felt, the yearning to run with the dogs, to become something more than human. In the mornings, the sisters would wake, their bodies entwined with the wild dogs who shared their bed, the scent of fur heavy in the air. But as Sarah slowly began to observe, it was not just the dogs who had changed. She had changed too. Her senses were sharper now, her hearing crisper, like the sound of the wind through the trees carried more weight. Her skin seemed to hum with energy, and her muscles, though slender, had gained strength, a fluidity in movement that felt unnatural but almost necessary. Her reflection in the water outside the house startled her. There, staring back at her, were eyes that were no longer the brown they once were. They had shifted, becoming amber, glowing faintly in the morning light, as though they held the secrets of the forest itself. Hannah, too, had begun to change. She moved differently, with more grace, more purpose. Her steps, once hesitant, had become deliberate. At times, Sarah would catch her sister pacing the edge of the woods, her gaze far off, as though waiting for something or someone. But when Sarah asked about it, Hannah only smiled, as though she ate her. Knew something her twin did not. They shared everything, their thoughts, their fears, their connection to the dogs. But there were moments, fleeting and strange, when Sarah felt a distance growing between them. Hannah's gaze would linger too long on the horizon, and the wind would catch in her hair, making her look almost wild, untamed. It was a feeling that unsettled Sarah, but she could not place why. The villagers, too, had begun to notice more. They spoke of it in hushed tones, the way the sisters walked with a certain grace, a kind of predatory elegance that seemed foreign to them. They had grown up in the same valley, yet the sisters moved as if they belonged to another world, one where humans and animals coexisted, bound by something deeper than blood. And when the full moon rose high in the sky, when the wolves howled in the distance, the Greenale sisters would disappear into the night with the dogs. The pull of the forest was irresistible. They could feel the change inside them, feel the ancient bloodline awakening. The transformation was inevitable. And yet, Sarah could not bring herself to embrace it fully, not yet. There was a part of her that still yearned for something more, something beyond the valley, beyond the endless nights spent with the dogs and the ever-growing pull of the wild. But as the moon rose higher in the sky, Sarah knew deep down that the time had come. The bloodline had waited long enough. The transformation was nearly complete, and the dogs, they had always known it. The following morning, the heavy scent of damp earth and pine needles filled the air as Sarah stood at the edge of the woods. Her breath hung in the cool morning light, misting around her face as she stared out over the forest. There was a strange pull today, an urgency she couldn't explain. It wasn't the wind, the dogs, or even the moon. It was something else, something older, gnawing at the edges of her mind. Hannah stood beside her, arms folded across, her chest, her gaze distant. The silence between them stretched long, neither of them speaking the words they both knew needed to be said. The tension that had been building between them over the past few weeks was now palpable, hanging like the thick fog in the valley. Sarah turned to her sister, but before she could speak, Hannah's voice cut through the quiet. "We've always known this day would come," Hannah said, her tone soft but resolute. "But I don't think you're ready for what it means." Sarah's heart raced. The idea of leaving the valley, of stepping outside the safety of their isolated world, had always been a fleeting thought. But now, standing in the woods that had been their home for as long as they could remember, the desire to leave felt almost impossible to ignore. "What if I don't want to become like them?" Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke the words aloud. "What if I want something more than this, more than what we've always been?" Hannah's amber eyes flickered, a glimmer of something dark flashing beneath the surface. "You don't get to choose anymore. The change is coming for both of us. The bloodline, it calls to us. It has always called to us." As she spoke, Sarah noticed the shift in her sister's posture. The once tender, playful edge to Hannah's movements had given way to something more predatory, something that seemed almost unnatural. There was a coldness in her expression, a certainty that unnerved Sarah. The air around them thickened, and Sarah felt the weight of her bloodline pressing down on her chest. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the deep, instinctual pull of the forest, and with it a realization that sent a shiver down her spine. The transformation was not a choice. It was a fate, and yet, even as the dawning truth began to settle in her heart, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was someone else who could offer her an escape. The dogs, who had always been by their side, seemed to sense her turmoil. They stood, watching from the edge of the woods, their eyes glowing faintly in the early light. Sarah felt their presence like a weight on her chest, their gaze almost knowing, as though they were waiting for her to make the final decision. Before she could say anything else, a sound from the woods broke the tension. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder as the moments passed, a rhythmic padding of paws, the unmistakable sound of something large moving toward them. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, and she instinctively took a step back, her eyes scanning the trees. Out of the shadows emerged one of the dogs, its large frame moving silently through the underbrush. Its fur was darker than she remembered, and its amber eyes, just like hers, gleamed with an unsettling intelligence. The dog stopped in front of Sarah, its massive body still, and for a long moment they stood there, locked in a silent understanding. "We've been waiting," Hannah whispered, her voice soft but firm. "The change is already upon us. We can't run from it." Sarah felt the weight of her sister's words settling over her like a heavy cloak. She knew deep down that Hannah had already embraced what was to come. The bloodline was hers to follow, to carry, just as it had been for the generations before. But Sarah, she couldn't bring herself to fully accept it. The dog's gaze was unyielding, and she knew it wasn't just the dog that was watching her. It was the forest, the legacy, the call of something far older than anything she could understand. As the dog stepped closer, its presence almost overwhelming, Sarah's mind raced. She had always known this moment would come, the moment when the pull of her bloodline would become too strong to resist. But she hadn't expected it to feel so suffocating, so final. Her heart pounded in her chest as she took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving the dog. "What if I don't want to change?" she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. But the dog didn't answer. It simply stood there, waiting. The evening descended upon the valley like a heavy, suffocating blanket, the sky deepening into a bruised purple as the stars began to flicker to life. The wind had shifted, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, and Sarah found herself standing once again at the edge of the woods. She hadn't meant to come out here. It had just happened. The pull, that insistent force within her, had dragged her outside without thought. The dogs were gone. Their presence felt only in the rustle of the leaves and the eerie quiet that enveloped her. Hannah was already out there, deep in the woods, as if she had known all along where Sarah would go. She moved silently, like a shadow blending with the darkness, her body twisting and swaying in unnatural ways. It was as if she had become one with the night itself, her movements fluid, more animal than human. The moonlight cast strange, elongated shadows over her form, making her appear almost as if she were a part of the forest. "You've come to see the truth." Hannah's voice broke through the stillness, soft but filled with a strange kind of finality. "You can feel it, can't you? The pull." "It's been there all along." Sarah swallowed hard, her throat dry. She wanted to turn back, to walk away from the forest and the strange transformation that seemed to be consuming her sister. But the more she tried to pull away, the harder the pull became. Her eyes flickered back to Hannah, her sister's eyes glowing amber, her face caught in the pale light, her features shifting, becoming sharper, more animalistic. "I can't just let it happen," Sarah said, her voice tight with fear. "I don't want to become one of them, Hannah. I don't want to be like you." Hannah stepped closer, her eyes never leaving Sarah's. There was no malice in her expression, but there was something far colder, something distant, as if she had already moved beyond the world Sarah still clung to. "You've always been afraid," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid of what we are, afraid of what's in our blood. But it's not something to be afraid of. It's something to accept." Sarah could feel the weight of her sister's gaze pressing down on her. She wanted to fight, wanted to reject the bloodline and the transformation, but the urge to submit, to give in, was growing stronger with every passing moment. She could feel the wildness rising inside her, a burning need to shed her humanity and embrace what she had always been destined to become. The dog appeared then, emerging from the shadows with a smooth, fluid grace that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. It was massive, its eyes glowing, with the same amber hue as Hannah's. It padded forward, its enormous paws silent on the forest floor, and stopped just in front of Sarah, its gaze unblinking, its presence overwhelming. She felt the wild, untamable power radiating from the animal, and for a moment, she wondered if she could ever fight against it. "Join us," Hannah whispered, her voice soft and coaxing like a siren's call. "It's time, Sarah. The transformation has already started. You can't stop it." "You never could." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, but she didn't look away. Her sister, the one who had always been so close, was slipping away from her, becoming something else, something more. And the more she looked at Hannah, the more she realized that there was no going back. The bond between them, once so strong, was dissolving, and soon Hannah would be lost to the pack, lost to the forest, lost to the wildness that had consumed their bloodline. Sarah closed her eyes, fighting against the overwhelming pull, but she knew it was useless. The decision had already been made for her. As the moon reached its apex, its light spilling across the valley, Sarah felt the change surge through her. It wasn't painful, not yet, but it was inevitable, and it was taking root deep within her. She opened her eyes, meeting the gaze of the dog, and for the first time she didn't feel afraid. The wildness, the hunger, was a part of her now, and with that realization, Sarah took a step forward, her body moving on its own, drawn by the bloodline, by the forest, by the dogs. Hannah smiled, her eyes shining with an eerie, predatory gleam. "Welcome home," she whispered. And with that, Sarah stepped into the night, into the forest, and into the transformation that had been waiting for her all along. The next few days passed in a haze, the world around Sarah blurring as the transformation took hold. At first, she had tried to resist. She stayed inside, locked in the farmhouse, hoping to escape the pull of the forest, the pull of the dogs, the pull of her bloodline. But it wasn't possible. The change had already begun, and it was too strong, too powerful to ignore. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the wildness rise within her. It whispered to her in the dead of night, calling her to the forest, urging her to join the pack. She could hear the dogs in the distance, their howls rising with the moon, a sound that filled her with both fear and longing. The air had become thick with their presence, their scent, their need. On the fourth night after the transformation began, Sarah couldn't fight it any longer. She slipped out of the house, barefoot and silent, the cool night air wrapping around her like a cloak. The full moon hung high in the sky, its light casting long shadows over the forest. She felt the tug of the dogs, the pull of the wild, urging her to come to join them. She moved through the woods as if she belonged there, her movements becoming more fluid, more instinctual with each step. She could feel the transformation in every part of her. Her senses were sharper now, her body stronger, more agile. Her eyes burned with the amber glow that had taken over her vision, and she knew, deep within her, that she was no longer fully human. The dogs had always been a part of her, but now she could feel their wildness flowing through her veins. As she reached the clearing, she saw them, the pack. The dogs stood in a circle, their amber eyes fixed on her as they waited. At the center of the group was Hannah, her eyes glowing brighter than ever, her posture sleek and graceful, her body moving like one of the animals she had become. "Join us," Hannah said softly, her voice a melodic whisper in the wind. "You've always known this is who you are, who we are." Sarah hesitated, a knot forming in her stomach. The fear, the doubt, still lingered deep inside her, but it was fading, replaced by something else, a need, a hunger she couldn't ignore. She stepped forward, her body instinctively aligning with the pack. As she moved into the circle, the dogs shifted, parting to make room for her. She stood beside them, her pulse racing, and she could feel the transformation deepening. The wildness that had always been a part of her was no longer something she could hide from. It was her now, coursing through her like blood in her veins. "Welcome home," Hannah said again, her smile sharp and predatory. She stepped forward and placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder, her touch warm but unsettling. "This is who we are. We are the pack, and we are no longer bound by human rules." Sarah looked out into the darkness, her senses heightened as she took in every detail: the rustling of the leaves, the scent of the damp earth, the faint movement of the animals in the underbrush. It felt as if the entire forest was alive, watching, waiting, and for the first time in her life, Sarah felt truly alive. She was part of something ancient, something powerful, and something far beyond human understanding. The dogs began to move, their paws silent on the forest floor as they trotted into the woods. Sarah, without thinking, followed them, her body moving with an unnatural grace. She could feel her muscles stretch, her bones shift, and the world around her seemed to slow. Every movement was fluid, effortless, as though she had always been made for this, made to run with the pack, to belong to the wild. She ran with them through the dense forest, the wind in her hair and the ground beneath her feet like an extension of her own body. The world had changed, and Sarah had changed with it. She was no longer bound by the rules of the human world. She had embraced the wild, the transformation, and the legacy of the Greenale bloodline. And as she ran beside the dogs, she knew there was no turning back. The transformation was complete. The days that followed were a blur of strange, wild energy. Sarah and Hannah, side by side with the pack, no longer felt the constraints of their human selves. They roamed the woods, their senses sharpened beyond anything they had ever known. Every sound, every smell was magnified, pulling them deeper into the wild, into the place where they truly belonged. The change was no longer something they could deny, it was who they were, and Sarah embraced it with a mixture of awe and fear. She could feel the connection to the dogs, the bond that had been passed down for generations, now fully realized. There was no more resistance in her, no more fear. There was only the pack, the wild, the forest. But even as she ran freely under the moonlight, her thoughts often drifted to the family farmhouse, to the life they had once known. She had left it behind in search of something greater, something untamed, but the weight of her family's history still lingered. It had shaped her. It had shaped them both. No matter how far she ran, it was a part of her, something inescapable, something she couldn't outrun. The nights were the hardest. During the day, the pack was content to rest, but as the sun dipped below the horizon and the moon rose higher, Sarah could feel the hunger stir deep within her, the need to hunt, to taste the sea, wildness of the forest. And so, the pack would move silent, fluid, like shadows in the night. They hunted together, a coordinated, almost ritualistic movement that spoke of generations of shared instinct. The dogs led the way, but Sarah and Hannah were not far behind. They were part of the pack now, moving as one. The hunt was not about survival, it was about connection. It was about the bloodline. One night, as they moved through the forest, the pack came across something unfamiliar. A scent, sharp and tangy, unlike anything Sarah had ever smelled before. It was human. A faint trail leading into the woods. Sarah felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She stopped, her amber eyes scanning the trees. The pack had slowed too, their attention fixed on the trail. Hannah, always the more instinctive of the two, turned toward Sarah. "There's a stranger in our woods," she whispered, her voice tinged with both curiosity and warning. "Someone's come too close." Sarah didn't respond immediately. The idea of a stranger in their territory felt wrong, unnatural. The forest, the dogs, their bond, everything about it had been so sacred, so personal. The thought of an outsider disrupting that equilibrium made her stomach tighten. "Do you want to find them?" Hannah asked, as if she could read Sarah's thoughts. Her gaze flickered toward the path, and there was something dangerous in the way her lips curled. "We can deal with them if you like." Sarah hesitated. The pack was already shifting, restless. The unfamiliar scent was close now, and with it a sense of trespass. Whoever had ventured this far into the woods would have to answer for it. "I'll go," Sarah said, her voice steady but filled with an undercurrent of something darker. "But we do it quietly. We don't need to scare them, not yet." Hannah gave a small nod, and the pack moved as one, following Sarah as she led them deeper into the woods. She could feel the tension in the prastida's air, the pull of something unknown drawing them forward. As they neared the source of the scent, the woods seemed to grow denser, the trees pressing in tighter around them. The moonlight barely penetrated the thick canopy above, casting the forest in an almost suffocating darkness. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, but it was not fear she felt, it was anticipation. The need to confront the stranger, to understand why they had come here, was more than a curiosity now. It was a calling. Finally, they reached a small clearing. There, in the middle, stood a man, a stranger, dressed in clothes that looked foreign to the valley. His eyes were wide, and his breath came in short, panicked gasps. He had wandered too far, too deep into the Greenale woods, and now he was surrounded by the pack. Sarah stepped forward, her bare feet silent on the forest floor, and she looked him over. His eyes locked with hers, and for a brief moment, she saw the fear in them. He was out of his element. He didn't belong here. "We don't like visitors," Sarah said, her voice low and threatening but calm. The pack behind her growled softly, a warning sound that reverberated through the clearing. The man didn't move. His gaze flickered to the dogs, then back to Sarah. I didn't mean any harm," he stammered, his voice shaky. "I didn't know. I was just looking for shelter." "Shelter?" Hannah echoed from the shadows, her voice carrying an edge of mockery. "You've wandered into our home, and now you'll pay the price for it." Sarah took a step forward, her gaze never leaving the man. "The price is simple," she said. "Leave, now." The man hesitated, his eyes flicking from Sarah to the pack. He could see the wildness in their eyes, the unspoken threat. He wasn't stupid. He knew that the Greenales were not like any people he had ever encountered. They were something else. And in this moment, he understood the danger he was in. "I'll go," he said quickly, backing away, his hands raised in surrender. "I won't tell anyone what I saw, I swear." Sarah watched him, her amber eyes cold and unblinking. As the man turned and fled into the darkness, she could feel the pack's restless energy settle. The woods were theirs again. And for the first time, Sarah felt a thrill, a deep satisfaction that came from knowing they had protected what was theirs: the forest, the bloodline, the pack. She turned to Hannah, who was watching her with a look of approval. "You did well," Hannah said quietly. "You're one of us now, completely." And in that moment, Sarah knew that there was no turning back. The transformation was complete. The pack was her family now. And she would protect them, just as they had protected her. Forever. The transformation had come faster than Sarah had anticipated. It was as if something had awakened deep inside her, something that had been buried for years beneath the surface of her human shell. Each day that passed, she grew more attuned to the forest, to the dogs, and to the wild instincts that surged through her veins. But as the days turned into weeks, she began to notice something else, something that unsettled her. Hannah had changed as well, but in a different way. While Sarah's transformation was marked by a deepening connection to the wild, to the earth beneath her feet and the sky above her head, Hannah seemed almost detached from it all. It was as if the wild had already consumed her completely, and she was no longer bound by the same earthly tether that Sarah felt. It was one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest came alive with the sounds of the night, that Sarah confronted her sister. "Hannah," Sarah began, her voice tense, "what's happening to us? What have we become?" Hannah didn't turn to face her immediately. She stood, gazing out into the woods, her back to Sarah. The firelight flickered in the distance, casting long shadows over her form. She looked almost otherworldly, her silhouette blending with the darkness of the forest. "You felt it, haven't you?" Hannah replied, her voice low, distant. "The change isn't just physical, it's in our blood, Sarah, our family bloodline. It has always been this way." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Hannah turned then, her amber eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. There was a coldness to her expression, an unreadable distance that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. "We were born this way," Hannah said. "This bloodline, our ancestors, they made a pact with the wild. The dogs, the transformation. It's not just a curse. It's a gift, Sarah, a way of life. And it's been passed down through the generations. But what you don't know is that it wasn't always this way." Sarah's brow furrowed, confusion clouding her thoughts. "What do you mean? Our ancestors?" "The stories. I always thought it was just a tradition, a way to survive." Hannah stepped closer, her expression hardening. "It started long before Maggie. Long before the first Greenale sister decided to let the wild dogs into her bed. It started with something darker, something far more ancient." Sarah's mind raced. "What are you saying, Hannah?" Hannah's lips curled into a tight smile, but there was no warmth in it. "Our family's bond with the dogs, it's not just about survival, it's about power, a power that goes back centuries. Maggie didn't just take in those dogs out of desperation. She made a choice, and every generation since then has been part of that decision. the realization hit Sarah like a wave. Her ancestors had made a pact, an unholy agreement with something beyond the realm of human understanding, a pact that had transformed them over the centuries into something else entirely. Hannah's voice grew softer, as though she was telling a secret that had been locked away for too long. We aren't just humans anymore, Sarah. We've never been. The bloodline was tainted long ago, and now it's coming for us. Sarah took a step back, her chest tightening. The bloodline. What do you mean? There's more to it, Hannah continued, her tone growing more urgent. The transformation we're going through, it's not just about becoming more like the dogs. It's about shedding our humanity entirely. We were meant to become something else, something greater. But there's a cost, Sarah. The wild calls to us. It wants us to leave everything behind, to give in to the beast inside. Sarah's stomach turned. She had known that the change was inevitable, but she had not understood the true nature of it. She had thought it was about the dogs, about the forest, about embracing the wild. But now, as the weight of her sister's words sank in, she realized that it was about so much more. The pack, the bloodline. It was all connected, and if she accepted the transformation completely, she would be lost to herself forever. Hannah reached out, her fingers brushing Sarah's arm, and for a moment, Sarah saw the hunger in her sister's eyes. The same hunger she had felt, the same wildness that had been calling to her since the moment the transformation began. Come with me, Sarah, Hannah whispered. It's time to embrace our true nature. You don't have to fight it anymore. Let the bloodline take you. Let the wild claim you. Sarah looked at her sister, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. She could feel the pull of the wild, the urge to give in, to join the pack, to become one with the dogs and the forest. It was a promise of power, of freedom. But it was also a surrender, a giving up of everything she had ever known. The decision weighed heavily on her heart. She could feel the wildness, the power, the transformation surging within her. But there was still a part of her that held back, a part that wanted to hold on to the last shred of her humanity. I need time, Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. Hannah's gaze softened, and for a moment, Sarah saw a flicker of something like regret in her sister's eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by a coldness that made Sarah shudder. Time is something we don't have, Sarah, Hannah said softly. The change is coming, whether you're ready or not. And with that, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the night with the pack. Sarah stood in the clearing, alone with her thoughts, the weight of her family's legacy pressing down on her. The bloodline, the dogs, the forest. It was all consuming her, and she didn't know if she could escape it. The full moon hung high above the valley, casting its light over the forest. And as Sarah looked up at it, she knew that her time was running out. The nights had become heavier, the silence more oppressive. Every evening, as the moon rose higher in the sky, Sarah felt the change growing stronger within her. The wildness in her blood was undeniable, but it was also something terrifying. Her body felt alien, as if it were no longer fully hers. It was as if something else was taking over, something ancient, something destined. The pull of the pack grew more insistent each night. The dogs would gather at the edge of the forest, their amber eyes glowing in the moonlight, waiting. And Sarah, torn between her human instincts and the call of the wild, would stand at the threshold of the woods staring into the darkness. She could hear the wind, the rustling of leaves, the distant howls of the pack. They were calling to her. Hannah, always so sure, had embraced the change. She had slipped away into the night with the pack, becoming one with the wild, her transformation complete. She had become part of the forest, part of the very bloodline that had once been human but was now something else. Something greater, perhaps. Something beyond understanding. Sarah, however, was still caught in the middle. The fear of losing herself, of becoming something monstrous, held her back. But as the full moon neared, The force that had been building within her could no longer be denied. It was the night of the ritual. The dogs had gathered in the clearing, the full moon casting its cold, silvery light over the forest. The air was thick with anticipation, and the wolves Sarah's ancestors waited for her, their eyes glowing like embers in the dark. They had come for her, as they had come for every Greenale sister before her. She stepped forward into the clearing, the weight of her decision pressing down on her like a heavy cloak. The dogs circled her, their movements graceful and hypnotic, and for the first time, Sarah felt the bond between them, the bloodline calling to her. Hannah appeared from the shadows, her eyes alight with a wildness that sent a thrill through Sarah's chest. "You're ready," she said, her voice low and filled with something like reverence. "The bloodline is ready for you. The wild is ready for you." Sarah looked into her sister's eyes, and for the first time, she saw the full extent of the change in Hannah. She was no longer just a sister. She was something else. Her features were sharper, more animal, and yet there was a calmness in her gaze, a peace that Sarah had never known. It was the peace of surrender, of acceptance. But Sarah hesitated. The fear that had been building inside her, of becoming something she couldn't control, of losing herself, gripped her heart. "I'm scared," she whispered. "What if I can't come back from it?" Hannah stepped closer, her expression softening. "You won't need to come back, Sarah. You'll become who you were always meant to be. The forest, the dogs, the bloodline, this is your true home." The pack closed in around them, and Sarah felt the familiar tug of the wild, the pull of the pack, the bloodline. She could feel the transformation in her very bones, could feel the wildness surging through her body, but with it came a deep, gnawing fear. Could she embrace this completely? Could she abandon everything she had ever known and become one with the pack? Before she could answer, the leader of the pack, a massive wolf-like dog, its fur streaked with silver, stepped forward. Its eyes were ancient, filled with knowledge beyond human understanding. It was the one who had been with her ancestors, guiding them through the generations, ensuring that the transformation would continue. The dog's gaze met hers, and for a moment, Sarah felt a wave of understanding wash over her. This was her legacy. This was her birthright. But at what cost? The dog bowed its head, as if waiting for Sarah to make her decision, and in that moment, she knew what she had to do. The fear still lingered, but it was overpowered by something deeper, a longing to become whole, to join the bloodline that had been calling to her for so long. With a deep breath, Sarah knelt down, feeling the earth beneath her grounding her. The pack watched in silence, their amber eyes glowing in the moonlight. She reached out to touch the dog's fur, and as her fingers brushed against its coat, a surge of power ran through her. The transformation was complete. As the ritual began, the dogs howled, their voices rising with the moon. Sarah felt the wildness within her stirred to life. She could feel her muscles stretch and shift, her senses sharpening, her vision growing clearer. The world around her seemed to slow, and she could hear every rustle in the trees, every movement of the pack as if she were part of them, as if she had always been. For the first time in her life, Sarah no longer felt human. She felt wild, free, and with that freedom came a sense of peace, a peace she had been searching for without even knowing it. The bond with the pack was complete, and Sarah had embraced her true nature. She stood, her body stronger, more powerful, her senses heightened. She was no longer just Sarah, Greenale. She was part of the pack, part of the wild, part of the bloodline that had been passed down through generations. And as the moon rose higher, Sarah howled with the pack, her voice joining theirs in the night. The following days were a blur of instinct and sharp awareness. Sarah no longer had to think about where to step or what to do. Her body moved in tandem with the forest. She was attuned to every shift in the air, every snap of a twig underfoot. The world felt alive in a way she had never known, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly free. The pack was her family now. The dogs, with their glowing amber eyes and powerful, sleek bodies, led her through the forest, teaching her the ways of the wild. She could feel their minds blending with hers, the shared thoughts and instincts flowing like an ancient river. There was no separation anymore. Sarah was no longer an outsider, no longer tethered to the human world she had once known. She was one with the pack, and that bond felt eternal. But as the days passed, Sarah began to sense something else, something unsettling. A shift in the air, a disturbance. The hunt, which had always been a natural part of their existence, began to feel different. The pack's movements were sharper, more urgent, and the scent of something unfamiliar lingered in the wind. One evening, after the sun had dipped below the horizon and the moon began its climb in the sky, the pack gathered in the clearing. Sarah stood at the center, her amber eyes scanning the trees, waiting. Hannah was beside her, her expression unreadable. The air between them had changed since the ritual, since Sarah had embraced the full transformation. Hannah had become distant, more focused on the hunt, her attention shifting away from Sarah and toward something else, something that Sarah couldn't quite place. "We hunt tonight," Hannah said, her voice cold and sharp. She wasn't looking at Sarah, but instead at the pack, her gaze, focused and intense. The pack seemed to grow restless at her words, their bodies shifting, tails twitching in anticipation. Sarah felt a ripple of unease wash over her. "What are we hunting?" she asked, but her voice was small in the presence of the pack. Hannah's eyes finally met hers, and for a moment Sarah saw something flicker, something dark, something dangerous. "You'll see," Hannah replied, her lips curling into a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "The bloodline has a price, and it's time we collect it." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. The words felt heavy with meaning, a weight she wasn't sure she was ready to carry. But there was no turning back now. The transformation had taken her to this point, and whatever was coming, she would face it with the pack by her side. The pack moved through the forest, their steps silent and precise, as if they had become shadows in the night. Sarah followed, her senses heightened, her muscles working in perfect harmony with the others. The forest whispered around them, the wind rustling the leaves in a language she was just beginning to understand. But the deeper they moved into the woods, the more Sarah could feel the tension rising. The hunt felt wrong. There was something off about it, something dark. As they approached the edge of the valley, the scent of something unfamiliar hit her nostrils. A sharp, metallic tang that made her skin crawl. She slowed her pace, instinctively falling behind the pack as they moved toward the source of the scent. Hannah paused, her amber eyes flickering with an intensity Sarah had never seen before. "Stay close," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "This is no ordinary hunt." Sarah's heart thudded in her chest, her breath shallow. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and oppressive, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. The pack moved forward again, and Sarah, unable to stop herself, followed closely behind. The trees began to thin, and in the distance, Sarah could see movement, figures, human figures standing in the clearing. But they weren't alone. The dogs stood around them, their eyes glowing with the same amber hue that had overtaken Sarah's own. It was then that Sarah realized these were not just strangers. These were intruders. The pack was not just hunting to survive. They were hunting to protect their territory, their legacy, and their power. Hannah moved forward, her body low to the ground, her steps quiet and controlled. Sarah followed her lead, but a gnawing sense of unease clung to her. She could feel the pack's bloodlust building, the urge to strike, to kill. She was one with them now. But even so, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in the hunt. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't just about the bloodline. It was about something darker. The figures in the clearing grew clearer, and Sarah saw them for what they truly were: humans, yes, but something more. They were tall, their features sharp and unnatural. Their eyes gleamed in the moonlight, but their gaze wasn't one of fear. They weren't afraid of the pack. They were waiting for them. Hannah stopped, her eyes narrowing. "You've come too close," she said, her voice low and filled with a chilling calm. "This is our territory." One of the figures stepped forward, his eyes locking onto Sarah's. There was something familiar about him, something unsettling. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she realized what was happening. These were not strangers. They were another pack, another bloodline. One that had been watching the Greenales for generations, waiting for the right moment to claim what was theirs. And now, that moment had come. The tension in the air was thick, as if the very forest held its breath. Sarah could feel it, the weight of something ancient, something territorial. The pack, once so united, now seemed uncertain. The dogs growled low in their throats, their amber eyes fixed on the strangers in the clearing. But it wasn't just fear or anger that Sarah sensed. There was something deeper, a recognition, a history that neither pack had been willing to acknowledge until now. Hannah stepped forward, her body coiled like a predator ready to strike. She had always been the stronger of the two, the one who embraced the wild with open arms. But tonight, as she faced the rival pack, Sarah could see something else in her sister's eyes, a hint of doubt, a flicker of hesitation. For the first time, Hannah seemed uncertain, as if the balance between the two packs was about to tip. "You're on our land," Hannah said, her voice steady but filled with an edge of warning. "This is our territory, and we will not allow any other pack to take what is ours." The leader of the rival pack, a tall man with striking, wolf-like features, stepped forward. His eyes, too, were amber, and there was a wildness in his gaze that mirrored Sarah's own. He looked at her, his stare intense, almost as if he could see straight through her. "We've watched you," the man said, his voice smooth but tinged with a darkness that sent a chill through Sarah's spine. "For generations, we've waited for the right moment to reclaim what was ours. And now, that moment has come." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had heard the stories of the Greenale legacy, of the bond between the dogs and the pack, but she had never imagined that another bloodline, another group, had been waiting in the shadows, biding their time. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was a war for the wild, for the very essence of what had shaped their bloodline. "We were here first," Hannah shot back, her voice harsh. "This land, this pack, is ours, and you have no right to challenge us." The man smiled, his teeth gleaming in the moonlight. It was a smile that sent a ripple of unease through Sarah. "You don't understand, do you?" he said, his voice almost mocking. "You were never meant to keep this land, this power. It was never just yours. The bloodline is ours too." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as the man's words sank in. It wasn't just a fight for territory, it was a fight for control over the bloodline itself. The wild, the dogs, the transformation, they were all part of a legacy that belonged to both packs, to both sides of the family. And now, it seemed, the time had come for the two bloodlines to clash. Hannah took a step forward, her posture shifting, her body leaning into the tension. She was ready to fight, ready to defend what she believed was rightfully hers. But Sarah, still standing in the shadows, felt the pull of something else, a voice deep inside her, a quiet whisper that told her to step back, to listen. There was more to this conflict than what met the eye, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the pack was not the only thing at stake. "What do you want?" Sarah asked, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. The man turned to her, his eyes narrowing. "What we want is simple. The bloodline, the dogs, the power you've held for generations. And we've come to take it back." The words stung, the weight of them settling over Sarah like a heavy fog. She had always known that the bloodline was special, that it held power beyond anything she could comprehend, but to hear it spoken so plainly, so coldly, felt like a betrayal. It was as if everything she had believed about her family's legacy, about her connection to the wild, had been nothing more than a pawn in a much larger game. "You can't take it," Hannah growled, her teeth bared. "It's ours, and we will fight to keep it." The rival pack leader smiled, a slow, deliberate grin. "We don't want war. We want what's ours. But if you refuse to give it to us, we'll take it by force." A low growl echoed from the dogs as they circled, their muscles tense, their instincts sharp. The air was thick with the promise of violence, of something ancient, something that had been buried for too long. Sarah could feel the tension building, her body trembling with the weight of the choice before her. She could feel the pack's eyes on her, their silent judgment pressing down on her. She had always followed Hannah, always stood by her side. But now, for the first time, she realized that she was no longer just a follower. She was part of this legacy, part of this battle. The choice to fight, to protect what was hers, was no longer just Hannah's, it was hers as well. The pack stood at the ready, the rival pack waiting for the first move. The moonlight cast an eerie glow over the clearing, and Sarah could hear the faint rustling of the trees, as if nature itself were holding its breath. The bloodline had always been theirs to protect, but now it was theirs to fight for, and Sarah knew without a doubt that the time had come to choose her side. The tension between the two packs was unbearable. The air was thick with the scent of wildness, of ancient power, and of something darker that lurked beneath the surface. Sarah's heart raced in her chest, her muscles coiled, ready to move at the slightest command. She could feel the eyes of the rival pack on her, their presence suffocating, their hunger unmistakable. They weren't just here for territory, they were here for the legacy, the bloodline that connected them all to the wild, to the dogs, and to the land itself. Hannah stood beside her, a fierce protectiveness emanating from her. Sarah could see the fire in her sister's eyes, the conviction that had always driven her. But now, there was something more, a hunger, a darkness that seemed to pulse in the air around them. It was as if Hannah had already fully embraced the wild, and nothing could tear her away from it. But Sarah, still standing in the shadows of her sister's transformation, could feel the pull of something different, a desire for control, for understanding, and for freedom from the grip of the bloodline. The pack leader of the rival group stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Sarah. "You don't have to choose this, you know," he said, his voice smooth, almost soothing. "You've felt the pull. You know what you are. You know what you're meant to become. Join us, Sarah. We've been waiting for someone like you." His words chilled her to the bone. There was something unnerving about the way he spoke, like he had already won, as if he was sure she would fall in line with the rival pack. But Sarah felt a flicker of resistance, a deep-seated instinct that told her not to trust him. This wasn't about freedom, it was about control, and it was not her place to give in to it. "We don't want your power," Sarah replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "We don't want to become you." The pack leader's smile faltered, but he didn't retreat. "Then you will be forced to choose," he said, his voice darkening. "You cannot have the bloodline and not face the consequences. The dogs, the forest, the legacy. It all belongs to us." With a low growl, one of the rival dogs stepped forward, its fur bristling with tension. The pack, sensing the imminent conflict, moved into position. The air was electric with anticipation, the forest holding its breath, waiting for the first strike. Sarah's pulse quickened. She could feel the wildness surging within her, but there was something else, something that held her back. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. This was a fight for the soul of the pack, for the legacy that had been passed down for centuries. She couldn't let it fall into the hands of those who would use it for their own gain. Hannah was the first to move. With a swift, fluid motion, she lunged toward the rival pack, her body shifting seamlessly into the predator she had become. The dogs followed her, their growls rising in unison, their teeth bared and ready for battle. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, watching as the pack collided with the rival group. The sounds of snarling, of claws digging into the earth, echoed through the clearing. It was a battle like no other, a clash of primal instincts, of bloodlines that had fought for dominance for centuries. And yet, Sarah couldn't move. She couldn't join in the fight. Not yet. A voice, distant but clear, echoed in her mind. It was her father's voice, the voice of every Greenale ancestor who had passed down the legacy. The bloodline is not just about survival, it's about choice. It's about embracing what you are, what we are. Sarah looked to her sister, who was lost in the frenzy of battle, her movements graceful but savage. But as Sarah watched her, she realized that the choice wasn't just about who would win the battle. It was about what she wanted to become. Did she want to be consumed by the legacy, by the wild, by the bloodline? Or did she want to carve her own path, to fight for something more than just what her ancestors had left behind? In that moment, she made her decision. With a deep breath, Sarah stepped forward, her amber eyes blazing with determination. She could feel the wildness in her, the call of the forest, but she refused to let it control her. She was not her sister. She was not the rival pack. She was Sarah Greenale, and she would decide what the bloodline meant for her. As she moved into the fray, Sarah's body seemed to shift, adapting to the instincts she had fought so hard to suppress. Her muscles rippled with strength, her senses sharpened, and her movements became fluid, almost animalistic, but she did not give in to the bloodlust. She fought with purpose, with restraint, focused on protecting the pack, protecting what was hers. The battle raged on, but as the minutes passed, the rival pack began to falter. The Greenales, united in their determination, were stronger than ever. The dogs, sensing victory, pushed forward, their howls filling the night air. Sarah's eyes locked with the pack leaders as the last of the rival dogs fell. He was wounded, his pride shattered. The pack had won. But Sarah knew that this victory was more than just about survival. It was about choice. And as she stood, breathing heavily, her amber eyes glowing in the moonlight, she understood that she had finally embraced her place in the bloodline. The rival pack was defeated, but Sarah knew that the battle was far from over. The legacy of the Greenales would continue, but it would be shaped by her decisions, by her choices. The wild was in her blood, but it would not define her. Not entirely. The battle had left its mark on the forest, on the Greenale pack, and on Sarah herself. The moon, now high in the sky, bathed the clearing in a pale, cold light, casting long shadows over the bodies of the fallen rival pack. The earth beneath Sarah's feet felt solid, steady, but there was a weight to the air, a heaviness that had settled deep in her chest. It was the weight of choices made, of a battle fought not just with claws and teeth, but with the heart, with the bloodline that had shaped everything she was. The Greenales had won, but the victory felt hollow. The forest, once alive with the promise of freedom, now seemed quiet, muted, as if it too was waiting for something. The pack stood around her, their amber eyes flickering in the moonlight, waiting for Sarah's next move. They had followed her lead, fought with her, and now they waited to see what would come next. Hannah stood nearby, her form silhouetted against the pale glow of the moon. Her eyes were still wild, still full of the power she had embraced. But even in her triumph, there was something else in her gaze, something tired, something lost. The fire that had once burned so brightly in her seemed dimmer now, as if the full weight of the bloodline had finally taken its toll. "You did well," Hannah said, her voice quieter than usual, as if the battle had drained something from her. "We've reclaimed what's ours, but it's not over, is it?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. Her eyes scanned the clearing, where the last of the rival pack lay in the dirt. She could feel the presence of the wild in her bones, in every inch of her skin, but now there was a sense of clarity that had been missing before. The bloodline, the legacy, these things had always been passed down with an unspoken promise, a promise of power, of dominance. But Sarah understood now that it wasn't the power of the wild that mattered most. It was the power of choice. She had chosen to fight, yes, to protect her pack, her family, and the land they had claimed as their own. But she had also chosen something else, something that had been hidden in the darkness of the forest for so long. She had chosen to shape her own legacy. She had chosen to not let the bloodline define her, to carve out her own path in a world that had tried to dictate her every move. The pack waited, their eyes on her, their future hanging in the balance. Hannah, too, looked at her, but there was a softness in her expression now. She had always been the leader, the one who had embraced the wild fully. But now, in Sarah's quiet strength, she saw something new, a path that did not require submission, a path that allowed both bloodline and freedom to coexist. "We don't have to follow the same path," Sarah said, her voice steady, but filled with a quiet authority. "We don't have to let the legacy consume us. We are more than the bloodline, more than what's been passed down through the generations." Hannah's amber eyes flickered, and for a moment Sarah saw a glimmer of doubt, of understanding. The wild had always been a part of them, a force that shaped who they were, but Sarah knew that it didn't have to define them completely. They were both the wild and the human, both the dogs and the family. The forest seemed to listen, its ancient trees whispering in the wind. The dogs, once fierce and untamed, now sat in silence, as if waiting for Sarah's final words. "This is our home," Sarah continued, her voice stronger now. "But we don't have to live by anyone's rules but our own. The bloodline is not a chain. It's a part of us, yes, but we can choose how to shape it." Hannah stepped forward, her expression softening. She reached out, placing a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You're right," she said, her voice quieter now, as if the weight of the battle had lifted. "We can shape it. We can be both the wild and something more." Sarah nodded, the weight of the decision settling in her heart. It wasn't just the dogs or the forest that called to her, it was the freedom to choose, to decide who she would be, who they would all be. As the moon rose higher in the sky, Sarah turned toward the pack. They had followed her, fought beside her. Now they stood at a crossroads. And it was up to her to lead them, not with dominance or power, but with a new understanding of the legacy they carried. "From now on," Sarah said, her voice clear, "we choose our path, together. The forest, the dogs, the bloodline, they are a part of us. But we are not slaves to them. We are free." The pack stood still, their eyes glowing in the moonlight. For the first time, Sarah saw not just wildness, but something more in their gaze, a respect, a unity that went beyond the hunt, beyond the bloodline. And with that, Sarah knew the legacy had been rewritten, not by force, but by choice. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the Appalachia. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to the channel for more thrilling tales of mystery and untold legacies. Stay tuned for what comes next, as the stories of the wild and the unknown continue to unfold.